Hey everybody, hope you're doing great today. This is Paul Sian, and with me I've got Walt Wollet. This is our first episode of the Green Chutes podcast. We're looking to expand our own horizons, help other people out as well to learn about the real estate market, the market in general, and just how to build wealth, how to protect yourselves in these interesting times. So with that, let's kick it off to Walt. Walt, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Background, what are you doing right now, and how long you been doing it?
So I've been a licensed mortgage originator for the past 10 years, and we own a small company here in Cincinnati. And we're looking at strategies to expand and go across the map, bring in people. So um, before that, I went to school. I worked for the Air Force as a financial specialist for a little bit, and that was a great experience. And really, my whole mission is to give people facts and to give them hope. A lot of people find themselves in situations, especially with real estate, where they don't think that there's hope. And so our podcast, I hope, shares good news and shares hope and positivity, because real estate and life in general, anybody can, regardless of where they're starting from, they can become better, and they can improve themselves with knowledge and action. So that's what I'm looking forward to discussing with my friend Paul here. So
Yeah, yeah, we've known each other for a while, and a little bit about myself. I'm an attorney. I'm licensed in Ohio and Michigan as an attorney, primarily work in the Ohio side, and I'm also a licensed real estate agent here, just north of the border in Kentucky. So I'm licensed in Ohio and Kentucky as a real estate agent. So I've been doing that for about 10 plus years as a real estate agent. So I do help out buyers. I do help out, buyer sellers. I've got a number of investor clients too, so I'm pretty familiar with the real estate investing aspects of it. And then also have plenty of clients as well who are, owner occupied and just looking to buy a home to live in and kind of grow their roots from there. So Walt and I, interestingly enough, we met. He reached out to me via LinkedIn before LinkedIn was before it was a cesspool that that is now. So LinkedIn's a bit of a mess right now. I'm sure you would agree, but
yeah, it's
not
just a
bad.
lot of, for a while, it was a lot of crypto people, a lot of people trying to sell crypto. I get a lot of, like, let's try to like buy leads, or hey, invest in us and we'll do this for you. But yeah, man, uh all these kind of tools are great, and I think you still can use LinkedIn, right, to meet people. And I'm thankful, to this day that I did that. But I was just going through LinkedIn as a young professional, and I was looking for, all right, who are the people that are look like outliers, right? And I'm glad I met you, because you're certainly an outlier. And where I'm sitting now is a beautiful property, and I'm really grateful and thankful to have it, and it's because of Paul. So shout out to Paul for sure. So
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, definitely, it's social media in and of itself. I mean, it's got its both positives and negatives. I mean, if you dwell on the cesspool that it can be, yeah, it can drag you down. But there are ways to kind of train the algorithm, so to speak, and just focus on the positives, ignore whatever else is out there, and just like you and I, connect with good people and just chat with good people and ignore all the rest.
yeah, do our best for sure. Easier said than Can be easier said than done.
Yeah,
But it is that social media creates an echo chamber. And I think people can do that in general. You can't have a closed mind. And that's I think one reason you and I get along so well is we're both constantly learning, new things. What's this, what's that? Somebody talks about something, and we're gonna work hard to figure it out. And not just for ourselves, but for the people that we represent and we help every day.
yeah.
So
So on to the real estate markets. What have you been seeing on the mortgage side? How's business over there? Is it slow? Is it a little more challenging for customers or clients? What are you seeing?
So I think affordability is still a concern for a lot of people. And where I what I would say is as far as that, you know, a lot of lenders will say date the interest rate. Interest rates are going to come down, and the reality is we don't know what interest rates will or won't do. The same as we don't know what property appreciation will or won't do. And I think that the strategy should be, you know, extreme due diligence when you're buying. On our side, there's always people that are buying. There's always people, you know, titles always changing over. It's just a question of, you know, can we help them? And as you know, I kind of play a different position because all the deals I necessarily touch, I won't take. You know, so I try to find, you know, we do owner occupied and investment properties, single family, you know, up to 4 units, and that's where I'm comfortable, right? Conventional FHA, VA, some jumbo products, and lately some HELOCs we've been doing through our partner. So we will do anything, but you always wanna shop lenders, right? You always want to make sure that you're getting with the best professional that gives you the time and explains things to you or gives you the level of service that you want. And ultimately, service is what wins. So we just, as my company expands, we're bringing newer people on, and people that were in the industry are coming back in, and just trying to be more of a service oriented company. And I've had sales managers in my career kind of breathing down my back, you know, and really, I wouldn't say I was successful until I started working with the people that made it about other people and made it about the activities that you're doing, right? So if I do anything, I want to educate people. I want them to make a good investment, get in the right place. The market is going to, you know, it's appreciating right now. You know, they said, you know, 6.8, close to 7%, you know, or more, depending on where you buy per year in Cincinnati. And we're lucky because there's a lot of opportunity in the Midwest. We don't have kind of like the investment crowd out that has that taxes and other sorts of regulation have caused on the East and West Coast. So Ohio and Kentucky is primed for growth, and we're going to continue to see that. You know, really, it wouldn't be. You know, lately there's a, you know, President Trump is trying to primary someone in Kentucky, and if Kentucky wasn't important, right? If this area of the country wasn't valuable and didn't have a future, that wouldn't, you know, that wouldn't matter, right? But
Yeah.
um, so that's what I would say is just like younger people need to start talking with people that understand, and they need to learn, and action is what's gonna action's gonna improve any possible situation.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And some of the headlines today, too, depending on where you're looking, that can be a little scary at times. You know, some of the markets like Florida is softening, Texas is softening. I think with a lot of that, the low mortgage interest rates, and then with the free money, people kind of flooded those markets. And then the work from home, where hey, you don't have to be anywhere near your place of employment, and that's kind of reversing now. Even under President Trump, he called everybody back to the office. I've been seeing a lot of even the local corporations here. They've been doing the same thing. They've been calling people back to the office. So yeah, in the past, where you could have a job here in Cincinnati or wherever in the U.S. and live in Florida, live in Texas, but now a lot of these companies are saying no, you need to come back. Some of those companies actually use that as a way to lay people off without officially saying, yeah, we're laying people off, because they expect attrition. Somebody who's moved, spent some money on a home, and they're kind of locked in now a little bit, and then they have to move back, sell their home, or try and rent it out. It's challenging at this point, especially when the mortgage rates were much lower then. And now if you have to do it, you're either looking at renting, or if you want to buy, then you're looking at rates that were down, and earlier, like in the 3-4%. Now we're in the 6-7%. So that's a can be a pretty big jump in payment.
right. And I think that the bigger issue too is that you know, rates come down, you know, which there could be bigger things that would certainly prompt that, macroeconomically speaking. But that happens, you are going to see more buyers come into the market. And so I don't necessarily think, there's going to be any sort of reprieve on price. I think that if you know what you want, what I always tell people is, hey, you gotta know what you want, figure out what you want, and kind of in tandem to that, go on the budgeting side, look at what am I comfortable paying, for the term of this loan, and don't go overboard, and don't go up to the max debt to income ratio, if you will. So um, yeah,
Yeah,
I
there.
think there's always, it's more, it's an educational thing. What we have to do every day is just kind of, people will treat, right, especially mortgage lenders, like a total commodity, and we're just, well, what's your interest rate, what's your number, and we need to be competitive as lenders. So I'm certainly not saying that, but you have to, if you want to win in real estate, you have to get with a solid team of people, and you have to stick together and help each other out. And I think that's ultimately what I would tell anybody that's thinking about moving forward. Even if it's just one purchase. Speaking of Florida, I saw the email from Bigger Pockets today, and I have some family looking in Florida, and does that mean there's going to be deals, right? If there's a lot more sellers, there's a lot more people that are motivated to leave, motivated to downsize, what have you. So one person's negative can be another person's positive, and that's the way of life. So I just want to make sure that if people starting out, they have the best opportunity, that it's positive and it's an investment, and they think about it appropriately. Because it's a big, a home, and getting involved in real estate can either be freedom, or it can be a weight around your neck. So
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the things too. Even we talk about the articles recently, and what I've seen is they say, hey, owning real estate or investing in real estate, they'll just look at cash flows, and while you're supposed to factor in, even on the investment side, even on the personal side, and where you own a house, as I'm sure you know, that you have to factor in, not just your mortgage payments, your pity, as they so call it, purchase amounts, interest, your taxes and insurance, but you also have to look at your maintenance as well too. I've been through a number of houses over here in the past, where people just kind of let things go. They figure, they don't necessarily have the money to patch up that roof leak, and it just starts getting worse and worse, and the mold grows in there. Finally, they can't live in there anymore. So unfortunately, they lose the entire house. So maintenance is a big key in a lot of those things, and you probably experienced that too from the borrowing side. Is that if they catch something on a appraiser goes in there, catches something, or home inspector catches something, and that can hold up the entire deal and cause a lot of deals to or collapse basically because it's not meeting a condition, and then either the seller needs to fix it up, or if they're not willing to do it, then the loan's not going to be made on that.
oh yeah, it happens all the time. And that deferred maintenance, I think one prediction for the future is that we've seen a lot of sellers pushing that onto the buyers. So that they, and oh, I just want the house, and I just want to get this, acquire it, secure it, especially if you have the right price. And they're willing, younger buyers, are sometimes naively willing to overlook, right? Like, oh, what's the date on the HVAC? What's the date on all the different components, right? Um, and so I do project that to change in a lot of cases, because I think that you know where we are going to see more sellers potentially over time.
Yeah,
Just people wanting to, as the older generation that holds the real estate gets out of it, right? There's going to be some concessions made, right? Because they're going to want to cash in on their equity nest eggs, and the younger folks, so long as they're primed and educated, they can, it. Why wouldn't you just get it done up front? If you remember when we bought this place, there were some repairs needed, and we waited until the home inspection, right? Until we knew it was literally going to be a problem with the lender,
Yeah.
to make to honestly go to the seller and then ask for a concession, and
Yeah.
they were willing to meet it. But I think there's a lot of times, in multiple offers and all sorts of bidding wars, that people don't want to ask for concessions, and really it's a necessity, I think. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah. This
once
past
once
couple of years when we had all this, this pretty big run in property prices, and like you mentioned, the multiple offers and just fewer homes available. So the problem became then is people are buying basically at the top of their budget, like you mentioned earlier. It's not something that they need to be doing. But then when everything is going into the house payment, covering your principal, interest, taxes, whatnot, and you don't have any money to cover the maintenance, then that's where you mentioned that deferred maintenance pops up, and oh, it's a small little leak. We'll just ignore it for now because it's not that excuse me, because it's not that large. So, but that over time that grows, that kind of just snowballs, and suddenly that whole wall is moldy, or suddenly your basement is flooded, and after that, it's kind of like there's no turning back. You don't take care of those repairs, the expenses just go up much more heavily too as the damage grows. So that becomes a unfortunate event for some of these buyers who bought at the top and didn't factor in anything for repairs. Their HVAC is old, like you mentioned. They let it go, and then suddenly, hey, we've had a bunch of hot days here last week, and talking with a couple friends, and their AC went out. Luckily, they were able to find somebody to maintain it, but you can't find anybody, or you can't afford to maintain it, and that's also going to cause some worse damage on your own personal health, and then your house's health as well too.
oh yeah. And maintenance is huge. And speaking of that, kind of related. So I have a little cub cadet, and I just had to make I'm having to put hundreds of dollars into it because I didn't maintain it very well. But I didn't know any better, right? So now I
Yeah,
know how to change the oil, change the air filter, gap, fix and gap the spark plugs, and wash the blades out, right, and all that kind of stuff. Clean the deck. um, so but before I didn't know anything
yeah,
about that. So I just kind of just ran it, to where it did become a problem. And I think that that's one thing, is just that extreme due diligence up front, where, all right, what am I purchasing? Does it have everything I want? What's the worst that could happen? If this goes out, do I have a plan? And human beings, what makes us great is we can plan and think ahead long term, even if it's not going to happen, doesn't matter. We can still foresee and think of, all right, if this happens, this is the shit, this is what I'm going to do, this is how I'm going to navigate this. And yeah, it's ultimately, I think, one of those businesses that we're in that just requires that. um
yeah,
like, because it nothing's worse than, you know if somebody feels that they made a that they bought a home at the wrong time, right? Or, oh, I shouldn't have done this, and it could be years ago, and they'll still blame us, Paul. you
yeah,
know so it's kind of just like, no, we're, like, we have to get all the information, all the data, right? um at what is the worst that could happen,
yeah,
right?
yeah. So speaking of, you mentioned crypto earlier. I don't know if you saw that quote. His name is Pulte, and I guess he's in charge of one of the governmental agencies. Let me see if I can find that.
Yeah, about Fannie and Freddie.
Yeah,
Yeah, it'll be I think ultimately how I would analyze it is they want to they kind of want to get set up, right? Because once you start accepting asset statements, or records of assets, if you will, you're going to need to have some sort of verification of that. So I think it's more of like, all right, how do we set up the infrastructure to where, this person's providing us this from Coinbase, and I don't even know what I'm talking about, right? But I'm just
yeah,
throwing out instant, names, right? They have this statement. well, are we electronically connected with them to where we can verify it and make sure everything's aligned, right? On the date that they submitted, did it match, right? So I think there's going to be some of that Fannie and Freddie is doing, and that's really me personally, what interests me about it, right, is those kind of mechanisms. But it is about time, really,
Yeah,
because people have been putting money into that, and loan originators have had to jump through hoops. Hey, like, if you want to use this as a down payment, you're going to have to sell this, and we can't use it as a reserve. So on these investment property loans, a lot of times you're going to have to show reserves. If somebody is all in on that asset class, it kind of has limited them as far as what they could do to real estate, and maybe that's what will change as a result of this.
yeah, yeah. I saw
But
it,
they're
and
also they're also going back to um, the government's giving over um, their management of it, essentially, right, and
yeah,
their oversight of it. So,
yeah, yeah. I did see an anecdote on Twitter as well too, where somebody was saying that they had crypto, and so this is before any official rule change took place. So what had happened there is they had, let's say for example, they needed a certain amount of reserves, like you mentioned, because they were buying investment property, and so they had this, for example, to say $100,000 in Bitcoin. Now the bank at that time would say, you don't have the reserves, we can't count Bitcoin, so they were forced to liquidate their Bitcoin, so they actually had $100,000 in cash prior to closing. Then the bank was like, okay, you've got the cash, we can close you out on this loan. Whereas, under these new rules, it looks like they can keep the Bitcoin. They have the $100,000 in Bitcoin. They can show them, as you said, a statement from Coinbase, one of the other coin trading platforms, and say, okay, here's $100,000 in whatever fart coin, Bitcoin, whatever you got, and then they'll say, okay, you're good to go. So it'll be a big change too, considering the current investments going on with the cryptos.
oh yeah, and what it had been for a while too, as was just they would just back it up. So they would be like, what is, like, we can't source this, right? So it's just like, we can't source this. The source of funds, they could be illegal, right? Like, we
Yeah,
would have to see when it went into the Coinbase and when it went out, and uh yeah, it became, a huge hassle. And it was just in the last few years that some of the bigger regional banks allowed you to use it. So some of the I don't agree with this business policy at all, but some of the banks will, if you have a certain number of assets under management with them, they will give you, better interest rates, right? Better pricing on products. And so people, that wanted to qualify for those products had to do what you said and liquidate, crypto, or liquidate other assets to move money into those accounts. So, I don't know. I think ultimately anything that kind of opens it up, right? Like, we always have to be on guard against fraud and against abuse. And I think a lot of these crypto assets, right, aren't assets at all. It's kind of, what does it do? And that's what I would always tell people to explain to me when the crypto salesmen come, is explain it to me like I'm a, border collie puppy. And you're gonna have to explain it to me like that, and like, all right, what does it do, right? Like, and I'm more sophisticated than that, but I want them to dumb it down and explain it to where is the utility, where is the value added. I get that it, some of it is for instantaneous payments. I'm invested in some different things, right? But it's just, I'll be honest, I see those investments as a gamble, right?
yeah,
I'm going off of friends who are smarter than me, and they've told me stuff, and I'm all right. I'll hold a little bit of this and see, right? They know more about that than I do. I know that in the future, I think the movement of money is going to get faster and cheaper, and I think crypto facilitates that to a large extent, and allows people to diversify in places where they otherwise wouldn't be able to.
yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah, definitely. Moving on to some of the recent global activities worldwide. I guess the big thing was too was the whole Iran and Israel thing. The oil prices didn't really stay up where they thought they would go because the bombing, it looks like, was quick. Seems like even after the ceasefire though, Israel and Iran are still kind of lobbing at each other some missiles and whatnot. So oil still, though, I was kind of surprised at that. A friend of mine was saying he predicted $100 a barrel, and it did kind of have a quick pop, but then it dropped down too, which, for the economic wise, I mean, that's a if the prices did go up, that kind of constrains a lot of people's budgets.
Yeah, it's very interesting. You know, and I think it was Shakespeare who said that the whole world's a stage and we're all just merely players.
Exactly.
So I think a lot of times, when I kind of look, I'm cognizant enough that there's stuff going on behind the scenes. Um, I'm glad that frankly, but and as you know, having talked, I'm just glad that Americans are safe right now. From nothing has happened that's as horrible as has happened over in that part of the world, right? The stuff that
Yeah,
happens every day.
could have been worse.
um, right, we haven't experienced that. There is a problem with violence, right? And there's a problem with violence in America, in inner cities, and there's a problem with people losing hope. But that, I think, is more solved by just being, having the right leaders and having the right people put in the right places to get people to see that hey, there's a future that's, you can build something legitimate and honest that helps people. And if you just go out and learn something every day, eventually you'll find a place to plug in and you'll be okay.
Yeah,
So, you
yeah. It's
know,
about it's about helping each other out too, not just yeah, we definitely need to get for yourself and for your own too, but in order to do that too, by helping other people out, it makes it much easier, and you get invested in their success and they get invested in your success.
absolutely. Um, but yeah, I think ultimately, and we're in uncharted territory globally,
Yeah,
but um, my prediction, right, is that I think a lot of equities are overvalued. I think that any sort of big quote event could severely diminish equities, and you'd see investors, move into bonds, right? And you'd see some breathing room in interest rates. But like I said, that doesn't mean that we're going to see any space or any freedom in pricing.
yeah.
On how expensive things are.
And things
So
might get squeezed further too. I mean, if you like you said, if the stock market start to go down, that's going to pull away money that some of the people have been using they've been tapping their stock market equity in purchasing investment properties or purchasing a second home. And so that's a lot of been happening too. And so in order to kind of cover those losses, then people are already starting to liquidate some of those properties too, where if they bought in one of those hot vacation towns, let's buy an Airbnb, and now suddenly the vacation goers have not necessarily going there all a whole lot. The free money is dried up, and student loan payments are going back again, and so those
yeah.
second and third vacations aren't happening for a lot of people.
Oh yeah. And yeah, I would predict, and kind of tell people that we have to adopt technology, right? And we have to use it in the best ways to help people. Like this podcasting, right, is like, for me, or any sort of crypto or any of that stuff. But just have to be really careful, because what you spend your money and what you put your time in is what you give power to in the world, right? So, um, like I having a smaller mortgage company, and a lot of my people are, like me, right, and they're watching everything going on in the world, and they might get nervous or they might get disheartened. We just have to keep pushing forward and moving forward, and hopefully peace prevails, and hopefully we don't find ourselves in a bad situation.
Yeah, definitely.
But if we do, like we'll do what we do every day, which is just, lead with honesty and lead with trying to do what's best to get people what they want, you know. So we just have to make sure that that they realize the pitfalls of what, sometimes what you want, isn't you don't need it right now, coming from a person that took, forever to set up their own company, right? But
Yeah,
I tried, right? But I wasn't ready, and
it takes
so
time.
sometimes it takes time to get yourself to where you want to be. But you got to start talking to people and start learning as much as you can every day. So
Yeah,
that's
definitely.
what we'll do with our show here, Paul. We'll
Yeah,
we'll 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 talk about stuff. But yeah, well, we could talk more about the Israel Iran stuff. Maybe we'll have a special podcast about that.
yeah,
So
yeah, definitely. I think that we covered pretty wide topics today, so I think we're good for this podcast. Anything last words you've got?
no, tomorrow's Monday, so I hope everybody makes it a great week. Get out there and just help someone learn something. Um, I have a lot to learn this week, and I'm sure I'm going to have all kinds of crazy stuff fly across the desk. But I'm going to be grateful for it. And working out here at the farm, remote, I'm still one of those lucky people right now. So, just living every day. Thankful.
Awesome. Well, I'll see you in a bit for the next podcast.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.